What's up, y'all? Welcome to Second and 15, a Philadelphia Eagles fan podcast presented by Old City Sports Network, the best network for all your Philadelphia sports needs. It's your boy, Michael Roscoe, and here's what we're breaking down tonight. The Eagles moved to 2-0 in the preseason, heading into the last game against the Vikings. We'll talk about what hopes and concerns we have for that game. Plus, we'll recap the win against the Pats, what is going on with the offense in practice recently with injuries, and Jalen Hurts' crazy practice passing streak. But before all that, if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe to the channel, which is just at Second and 15, and also turn on notifications so you don't miss a single moment of content. Also, don't forget to follow us on X, Instagram, Facebook, as well as the Old City Sports Network pages, which are also on all three of those social media platforms. Now, I'll be honest with y'all, I don't even have an NFL News of the Week segment for this week because there is just so much to talk about regarding the Eagles, and I really want to focus on that. But before I do all of that, let me give a quick shout out to our sponsors. Second and 15, a Philadelphia Eagles fan podcast, and Old City Sports Network are brought to you by Righteous Felon Craft Jerky. With the season almost here, you'll want a delicious snack during game time with some awesome craft flavors, as well as being gluten-free, low sugar, and made right here in the US of A. Head to your local store, or better yet, head to righteousfelon.com and use our promo code OCSN, all lowercase, for 15% off your order. Any orders over $50 will receive free shipping. We are also brought to you by SeatGeek. Head on over to SeatGeek.com or download and use the app today to get your tickets for your next sporting event, concert, comedy show, and more. And don't forget to use our promo code Old City Sports Network, all one word with E at the end of old, for $20 off your first purchase. Additionally, if you cannot make your event for whatever reason, SeatGeek will offer you credit towards your next event. Additionally, we are presented to you by Warlord Beard Oil. Head on over to warlordbeardoil.com and use our promo code Old Sports with an E at the end of old for 15% off your beard oils, wash, soaps, lotions, apparel, tools, so much more. Orders over $75 will also receive free shipping. This podcast is also brought to you by Decals by Aaron. If you're in the Delaware County area and looking for your next Delco merch, head on over to decalsbyaaron.com today. And finally, don't forget to support the ones who bring you these episodes each and every single week, along with other shows such as Quit Chasin', Flyers Alley, Check the Net, The Living Room Show, and more by heading on over to oldcitysports.com and checking out our merchandise. From t-shirts to hoodies and more, use promo code OLDCITY for 15% off of your purchase. All right, let's go ahead and break down this Eagles news that we got going on. There is so much that has happened this week. It's a lot to go through, but just hang tight and we're going to get through it all tonight. First up, we got some roster moves for the Eagles, one of which just occurred today on Wednesday. Eagles re-signed offensive tackle Gottlieb Oyedze. He was previously signed as an undrafted free agent out of Maryland, then released by the team earlier this month. In addition, quarterback Tyler Hall lands on the IR list after an injury that he suffered. However, as of Wednesday, there's been reports circulating around that he is going to be released on an injury settlement. However, the Eagles have not come out and said that just yet on their website, but we'll keep an eye out on that. But to make room for Oyedze, the Eagles released defensive back Mekhi Garner. Additionally, as of Wednesday, the Eagles bring back guard and center Jason Poe after waiving him earlier this month. And to make room for him, the Eagles waived tight end CJ Ozuma. I imagine with all the injuries occurring to the offensive line, which I'll get into later, they need to beef up the roster with more O linemen, bringing these guys back. And as for CJ, it kind of makes sense. His blocking, or lack thereof, I should say, in that game against the Patriots was atrocious and just a huge liability. And speaking of injuries, I'm not exactly sure what's going on the offensive side of the ball, but we have been seeing injuries left and right from offensive linemen to tight ends, and more recently in the running back room with Saquon Barkley. He didn't practice Wednesday except through individual drills. And apparently, in Tuesday's practice, he was getting his lower back looked at slash rubbed by the trainers. He didn't leave immediately for the locker room. He came out and signed some autographs, and he wasn't listed on the injury report for Wednesday, which sounds optimistic to me. But man, this O line throughout camp, we've seen Landon Dickerson, Lane Johnson, Cam Jurgens, Mekhi Becton, Tyler Steen, Trevor Keegan, Matt Hennessy, and possibly even more that I can't remember at this point, dealing with some type of injury. And you got Steen, Keegan, and Hennessy still dealing with their injuries and not participating in Wednesday's practice. In addition to those three, there were four other offensive players dealing with injuries who did not participate in the final practice of training camp or were limited, which included Dallas Goedert with oblique injury, Albert O with his abdomen injury, and wide receivers John Ross and Johnny Wilson both dealing with concussions. But I just want to know why it seems like offensive players in camp recently have been made out of glass bones and paper skin. I know the defense has been amped up this past couple of weeks. It's been looking really good, which is when I feel like a lot of these injuries seem to start. Now, has the defense improved their physicality and it's just taking a toll on the players? Is it just growing pains from learning a new offense? Is it old injuries that are still taking their time to heal? I have no idea. But thankfully, we're still a couple of weeks away from an actual regular season game. So that gives me some time. That gives time for these players to heal up. And I'm hoping these injuries aren't that serious and that the trainers and medical staff are working tirelessly to make sure that these players heal as quickly but as efficiently as possible. We saw from last season, we do not want to rush injured players back in the game. We do not, period. All right. Last week, we saw the Eagles take on the Patriots, and there was a clear quarterback winner on this night. And prior to watching the game, you may not have been able to guess who it was. Sirianni once again sat the offensive starters this game, so we should expect to see them in the final preseason game, barring any weather related difficulties. The first couple of drives for both teams aren't that great. We see the first notable play come at just 7 minutes left in the game in the first quarter, with Jacoby Brissett in the red zone firing a pass, which is intercepted by DB Avante Maddox for the Eagles from the safety position, runs for about 47 yards before going out of bounds. But honestly, in a regular season game, he would have taken that straight to the house for a pick six. He had too much space to not do so. But this gives the offense some more practice reps, which I think in preseason is super important, especially with what we dealt with last year. Kenny Pickett would throw a nice pass on third down to John Ross for a conversion. However, the drive would end with a 42-yard field goal from Jake Elliott. And Patriots kicker Joey Sly would tie the game up at 3 with a field goal of his own with 11 minutes left in the second quarter. Now, the offense would continue to struggle in the second quarter with Pickett leading, especially offensive lineman Max Sharping, who I believe normally plays guard, but he was playing left tackle and just getting beat every single time. However, running back Will Shipley would continue to show that dynamic playmaking ability on a screen pass from Pickett. I know screen passes don't get the flashbacks, but he was dodging tackles left and right and getting good yards after contact, picking up 19 yards on a 2nd and 22. With 2 minutes left in the half, third and goal, Pats QB Drake May rushes, avoids a tackle from defensive back James Bradbury, shocker, I know, for a touchdown. Pats up 10-3. Now, going into the third quarter, Eagles quarterback Tanner McKee would take over and makes a name for himself, dropping an absolute dime to tight end EJ Jenkins for a first down. However, they fail on a tush push attempt on fourth down after McKee bobbles the snap. On the next offensive drive for the Eagles, McKee would drop another dime, this time to wide receiver Joseph Ngata for 10 yards and a first down, but would fail to make anything of this drive. Defensively, we see edge Nolan Smith get a monster sack on Drake May. Going into the fourth quarter, Will Greer in at quarterback for the Eagles drops back and passes to tight end EJ Jenkins with a fantastic leaping catch for 19 yards. He got some air on that catch. I'm telling you, you'll have to go watch that. However, this drive would end with a Jake Elliott field goal. Birds still down 10-6. The Pats would finish their next drive with a field goal, increasing their lead to 7. For the Eagles, Tanner McKee would make a return as a quarterback, which I found surprising. But I guess with what they were playing with, they said, let's see what he got. And he leads the offense down the field with great plays such as a 10-yard and 28-yard passes, both to wide receiver Joseph Ngata once again. He had a hell of a night, I'm telling y'all. This drive would end with a Kendall Milton 1-yard rushing touchdown, and they decided to go for 2. This would be successful as Tanner McKee finds wide receiver Anais Smith in the front corner of the end zone for the 2-point conversion. The Pats would be unable to score on their next 2 drives, the last ending with a fumble from quarterback Bailey Zappi, recovered by linebacker Brandon Smith of the Eagles. The Birds win 14-3. Now, this was an interesting game to watch. I really didn't think it was going to be that, I don't want to say on the edge of my seat, but it caught more of my attention. I feel like, it's preseason. People don't pay a whole lot of attention unless you're a super avid fan. But even some analysts were like, this was a closer, pretty intense game for a preseason game. So looking into all this, I'll give you my players who I believe their stock is rising and who their stock is falling after this game. So we're going to start with the stock rising. And I first got to give it up to quarterback Tanner McKee. I mean, if you watch this game, it was pretty freaking obvious. He made a strong contention for quarterback 2. Now, even though head coach Nick Sirianni, when asked about the backup quarterback situation, he stated, quote, Kenny Pickett is quarterback 2. But to me, McKee looked like a natural out there. Yes, he fumbled what could have been a successful tush push. However, he didn't crumble under the pressure like we saw with Kenny Pickett. Now, mind you, this was also with the same offensive line that Pickett was getting pressured under and ultimately sacked on a few plays. Everything that Tanner McKee did just looked natural. His passes were timed perfectly, and they were perfectly placed into the receiver's hands. He was aiming for the numbers, not in any obscure place where it'd be difficult. You can probably say, no, it was Will Greer. Never mind. I was going to say the EJ Jenkins catch, but not in any obscure place where it'd be difficult for the receiver to catch. McKee would finish 25 for 31 for 179 yards and a 97.4 rating. The next player who I believe their stock is rising is tight end EJ Jenkins. This guy, he came out of nowhere this game. He had at least 2 awesome catches, including that leaping catch. He finished with 5 receptions for 47 yards. Now, with the release of CJ Uzomah, Jenkins can solidify himself as the tight end 3 behind Grant Calcaterra and obviously Dallas Goedert. The next player I have on my rising stock is, once again, running back Will Shipley. This man can just do it all. He continues to show the work he's been putting in and fighting for his job, which personally, I think he should have the running back 2 job in the bag. I'm assuming they're going to go with Kenny Gainwell. He's a great player. They have experience with him at running back 2, but I could see Will Shipley pushing him out of that job in the middle of the season if he continues to play that the way he has been. He would finish with 5 carries for only 15 yards, but with also 4 receptions for 41 yards. Next I have on here is wide receiver Joseph Ngata. Compared to last game, Ngata showed up. He looked very physical, caught all 5 of his targeted passes for 88 yards. Now, I do believe it is still a long shot for him to make the roster. He was in this position last year. I can see him being a valuable practice squad guy and be able to be called up and do the job if he is called up. All right, my last rising stock player I have on here is none other than linebacker Nakobe Dean. He was the highest graded Eagle in that game with a flat 90 rating, logged 5 tackles. Just noticeable improvement from the first game. He has been doing much better in camp than we were seeing. He still tends to struggle in pass coverage. It's not his strong suit, but he's definitely still making that contention for making a name for himself. He's trying to be the player that people expected him to be and possibly more than that. All right. Now for my falling stock players. The first one I have on this list is quarterback Kenny Pickett. Unlike McKee, Kenny Pickett struggled with the defensive pressure. Granted, the O-line really didn't help him out much, but if McKee is able to escape the pressure and get the ball out for big gains, then the guy who's supposed to be quarterback 2 should be able to do as well. It was not a strong game for him. He really has to make improvements in this game against the Vikings, or else I don't know if people are going to think this trade was worth it. Next, I have defensive back James Bradbury. Flashbacks from last year, y'all. Missed tackles left and right, including one that would lead to a touchdown from a rookie rushing quarterback. It's like he's lost all tackling fundamental skills. If he didn't have that big contract under his belt, I would be very surprised if he made the roster. Final player I have on here is offensive lineman Max Sharping. The tape says it all. Again, he plays guard. Not sure why they had him at tackle, but after that game, he shouldn't ever take a snap at anything but guard again. Not a great show out of Sharping. All right, y'all, switching gears. Everyone's been talking about it. Analysts left and right, Nick Wright, Barstool Sports, whoever. We're talking about Jalen's practice passing streak in camp. Now, as of Tuesday, he had made 301 pass attempts, all without an interception and around a 77% pass completion rate. But on Wednesday, after 305 passing attempts on that 306th, Hurts threw his first interception on the final day of camp, mind you, because the next 2 days are going to be walkthroughs, in which Darius Slay blew up the route of the receiver and made the interception. Now, of course, this is practice, so you got to take that into consideration. However, realistically, you got to admit, when you think about the variety of passes he's actually been throwing in camp, it's pretty impressive. But of course, you got the haters, like Nick Wright, who are complaining that it is too few interceptions. This is the same man ripping Jalen last year for too many interceptions, mind you. And Wright mentions his 2 hypotheses as to why Jalen hadn't thrown a pick up until this point. And that was that either Jalen is being too cautious or that the defense is hot garbage again. Here's my opinion of this subject. The thing is, Jalen hasn't been playing conservatively. Yes, he's thrown some check down passes, some wide receiver running back screens, some 5 to 10 yard in and out routes. But he's also thrown the deep passes, the go routes, passes ranging from 30, 40, 50 plus yards out, and completing a good amount of them. To me, that's not being cautious. That's showing a variety in the offense, something we didn't see last year at all, and is having success with that offensive variation, especially with Jalen Hurts. Now, regarding the defense, if you've read the reports about the defense, yes, they had a slow start to training camp, but they dialed things up in recent weeks. You've got multiple corners such as Ringo, Rogers, Slay, Mitchell, and more making excellent pass breakups or providing great enough coverage to where Jalen doesn't even throw in that direction because of the anticipation of a possible interception. Plus, you're seeing interceptions occurring with the second and third teams, and pressure with the first team resulting in sacks, passes out of bounds, linebackers tipping passes, whatever it may be. The defense has been on fire recently and putting a ton of pressure on Hurts. At the end of the day, sure, practice is practice, and only the real thing matters. And to me, there's a lot of truth to that. But it is clear Nick Wright doesn't do his research and just opens his Philly hating mouth and word vomits whatever BS negative opinion about the Eagles that he has. If it was any other quarterback, Brock Purdy, Justin Herbert, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, my God, Patrick Mahomes, especially Patrick Mahomes, this would be a totally different narrative. He literally even said in his YouTube show, after he made those statements about Jalen's too few interceptions, that quote, if you were to ask me what a suitable amount of camp interceptions is, I don't know. Probably however many Patrick Mahomes throws. Like, there's crystal clear bias from this man. I bet your ass he'd be like, Josh Allen is a superstar throwing 0 interceptions at practice, or Lamar is going to be MVP again. He only threw 1 interception, or Patrick Mahomes is going to three-peat since he hadn't thrown an interception in practice. That is what Nick Wright and potentially a bunch of other analysts would be saying if it was any other quarterback in this situation. But since it's Jalen Hurts, they're just going to assume it's conservative playing, bad defense, poor play calling, or whatever. Hurts is never given the benefit of the doubt from these Philly haters. Point being, our offense and defense look great. Things are looking much better than last year. I can't imagine Hurts is going to throw 0 interceptions in the regular season. That'd be downright impossible. But I'm anticipating that he's not going to have a 15 plus interception season again. I just can't. With the way he's been playing, nah. All right. Looking at the preview of the final preseason game, the Eagles versus the Vikings. The Eagles will close out the preseason at home against a familiar team, that in the Minnesota Vikings. And with everything that's been going on so far in camp, the previous preseason games, and everything leading up to the final roster cuts, here are my hopes and concerns going into this game. Starting with the hopes, my first hope is that we get to see the starters for only like a series or two. With all the injuries and injury scares that have been circulating across training camp, let's not take a chance on having one of them injured by overplaying them in a preseason game. Sometimes I feel kind of shitty saying that because it insinuates that I don't mind if the backups are getting injured. To be clear, I don't want anyone injured, regardless of their position on the depth chart. I just want an injury-free game, see a couple series from the starters, then rest them and prep them for Brazil. What I also hope to see is some more blitzing from the defense. In practice earlier this week, the offense saw more pressure from the defense, which led to sacks by multiple defensive players and obviously that interception by Darius Slay. But I would like to see how this defense does to an unknowing offense. I'd really like to see if the pressure they've been dialing up would translate over to other teams. My other, probably last biggest hope that I see out of this game is that we get to see a lot of Cooper DeJean in action. Now, Wednesday, he told reporters that he will be playing in Saturday's game. I think this is something all Eagles fans have been hoping to see, especially since he's missed 11 practices with that offseason non-football related injury. And since his return, they have had him at nickel corner and outside corner. And I would love to see what he is able to do against an opposing offense. Apparently, he didn't have the greatest practice on Tuesday. The majority of his practices since his return have been from injury have been good though, and he beat Covey in one-on-one drills in practice on Wednesday. He has seen some first string reps, but mostly second team snaps at the nickel and outside corner positions. So I'm hopeful we'll see him in some preseason action and see what this man can do in the NFL. Moving on to my concerns going into this game are, of course, the injuries. We've seen a lot of injuries and scares in camp so far, especially with our offensive line. I'm concerned that as we go into this final game, that more injuries are possible. But I'm going to manifest an injury-free game / rest of the season. It's been a lot already. There's no need to pile more on top of that. Please, I'm begging you. My next concern is Kenny Pickett's value. We've seen the third string quarterback outshine Kenny Pickett in the past couple preseason games. We traded for Pickett with the expectation of jumping right into being that guy to back up Jalen Hurts. Granted, Pickett struggled under pressure with guys on the offensive line who are either further down the depth chart or won't even be on this roster at the end of next week. I feel like we wouldn't see Pickett perform as badly as he did behind our starting offensive line. Regardless, he needs to make major improvements in his decision-making abilities, timeliness, as well as getting out of the pocket. It's all got to improve for me to be less concerned about his value on this team. Another concern I have is defensive back James Bradbury. I have him as a concern because we all saw how he played against New England. It was bad. I'll be blunt. It was bad. My concern is not only that if he continues to be this bad, it makes our safety depth less reliable, but it also draws the concern of what if he gets cut? Sure, we'd have a poor performing player off of our roster, but at what cost? Well, it couldn't be bad for maybe the first couple of years, but maybe not after that. According to Over the Cap, cutting him now that it's past June 1st, the Eagles wouldn't be saving any money with this year, but it would cost the Birds around $10.9 million in cap space, along with anywhere ranging from $8.3 to $15 million in dead cap, depending on the source that you look at. After this year, if we don't see improvement, Philly is going to have a tough decision to make. All righty, y'all. That's it for this week's episode. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, or follow on YouTube, X, Instagram, Facebook, and now TikTok by searching at Second and 15. That's 2NDAND15, or by the full name Second and 15, a Philadelphia Eagles fan podcast. You can also find the audio for each and every single episode releasing Thursday mornings on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Player FM, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you all next week. Enjoy the final preseason game this Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and we'll see who makes that final roster. These are all topics that we will dive into in that next week. Don't forget to stay fly like an eagle, and as always, go Birds.